Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the new Tier 9 European battleship, Gustav Dentor. I apologize for the pronunciation as always, but this is the new radar battleship at Tier 9. We took a look at Thor yesterday. These are shaping up to be incredibly powerful. In fact, the Gustav that I played went pretty well, and yet it was not the final release. This one is actually going to get buffed on release compared to what I played. So what are they changing? The alpha damage is going up from 11,400, which is what I played with, to 12,100, which will be pretty nice for this thing, as well as a 2-second reload buff. I had a base of 26-second reload on the guns, and it's going to 24-second base reload now. So even faster, harder hitting guns, and they already did pretty well, I gotta say. These new ships, of course, are a new tech tree line. It comes in early access, unfortunately, but wait 2 months and you'll be able to grind through these things just like a normal tech tree line, which is what I would recommend. These early access events are always way too much money for ships that you will just get completely for free in a couple of months. Now then, back to Gustav. A tier 9 means super ship up tiers. What happens if we brawl a Hanover in this thing? The torpedoes are going to be very similar to the torps off of Thor. So if you saw that video, you know these hit pretty hard. 17,500 alpha, and they travel at 65 knots instead of 70 knots. So a little bit slower there. You also only do get 6 of these torpedoes per side instead of 8 per side. And I rushed things way too soon here. But shouldn't we be dying a lot sooner to a Hanover in a brawl? The armor is surprisingly good. We only have 65k HP here, and yet we're surviving for quite a long time. The armor values are pretty much the same as Thor, 40 mil deck armor, 70 mil upper belt, which is why Hanover secondaries aren't really doing a lot of damage to us as long as I'm showing enough broadside. The main guns here are going to be 381 millimeter main guns with atrocious stern firing angles. That is a big difference here in the survivability department. We have 44-degree firing angles backwards, and yet I did not find myself taking too much damage when I showed that much broadside. These ships are low in the water, and their citadel is at waterline with some spaced armor, so it feels a little strange that these ships can survive for so long. Yes, we did actually trade out a Hanover in a brawl. It's kind of insane. Of course, the main gimmick is not survivability and brawling. That is not what you should do, but limit testing, we got to figure out how tanky these ships really are. The gimmick here, of course, is the 10-kilometer radar. Yes, that is going to be massively impactful in basically every game you're playing. The enemy Halford here smokes up in front of us and the GQ Johnny, and we just get to radar him. So what do you do against that as a destroyer? Just more radar for you to try to deal with. It's going to be hard, though, as keeping this ship spotted and not long enough for your team to take it out will not be very easy with the 11.4 kilometer detection here. A big strength of the tier 9 compared to the tier 10, in fact, is its concealment. It's a lot better. So this ship is going to be very difficult to permanently stay lit so that your team can farm it out as a destroyer player without being in that radar range. It's hard to fight against this line. Although when I miss my salvos, maybe it's not so difficult. This is not great shell velocity, though, for 380 millimeter guns. Pretty average to even below average, slower 380 millimeter shells than German 380 shells on like Pommern and Tirpitz and Bismarck. Slower shells than that yet. And while they are getting that damage buff, I didn't get to play with that, unfortunately. 1.8 Sigma Battleship Dispersion. And you'll see that dispersion definitely be trolling me throughout this video. However, it's also shapes up to have some of the best dispersion I've ever seen out of 1.8 Sigma from time to time. I'm not sure what that's about, but expect a lot of randomness when it comes to whether your salvos actually are that impactful. And for me, that's a little bit frustrating. Okay, just personally here. I find inconsistency to be a little bit annoying, and that's really the balancing factor it seems like Wargaming has gone with here. I suppose the poor kiting angles on Gustav here in particular, as well as the not great shell velocity on the 380 millimeter equipped ones. The tier 10 does not have those problems, of course, but at tier 10, maybe the HP pool starts to matter a little bit more. At tier 9 here, we still have decent enough HP at 65k. And considering our concealment, and we're choosing to be in a lot of these engagements, it was quite tanky. Although, yes, no citadels on the broadside Hawk, somehow. Well, we didn't get a lot of damage in this battle in particular. The radar utility is just crazy for zoning out these poor destroyers. You push up to the caps, 10-kilometer radar covers, well, close to 2 of them on this map in particular, and the enemy destroyers are going to have a very, very difficult time. The ship, of course, is also pretty quick, especially with this engine boost up, much like we saw on Thor. We do have that 25% engine boost. Only 120 seconds duration on this one instead of 135 on Thor. You get a maximum duration to use throughout the battle, and then that is it. I think that is a benefit, actually, because I'm often using it for when I need the maneuverability buff, rather than to just go a little faster across the map, that kind of thing. So I personally did enjoy this consumable quite a lot. Our base speed is a little bit slower than Thor, though. At tier 10, we only have a 31 knot top speed base instead of 33 knots like Thor. But with speed flag and this engine boost up and brisk, you're still well over 40 knots if you need to cross the map rather quickly. I, again, found it a little bit better used as an acceleration boost, prop mod boost for us in our back pocket, allowing me to take rudder mod. Because the rudder shift here is still decent at 15.1 seconds, but taking rudder mod gets that a little closer to 11 or 12 seconds, somewhere in there. It feels a lot better. Our turning circle radius of 840 meters also allows us to play a lot like a battle cruiser. So we tank pretty well with our armor. It's way better than battle cruiser armor. But then we can also avoid a lot of incoming damage like battle cruisers too. Look at that dispersion, by the way. That's 1.8 Sigma battleship dispersion, okay? This is not battle cruiser. This is not like 2.1 Sigma, anything like that. This is mediocre Sigma with the worst dispersion table. And somehow these are the salvos we're getting in this battle. This battle in particular, this ship decided to just work. I'm slightly underleading though, as you notice throughout this one too. Trying to get used to these guns after playing Thor is quite the difference. More than a 2-second lead time difference at 20 kilometers. Another just consistent Citadel salvo on that Moskva. Brawling a Los Andes, at least at closer ranges, seems pretty good considering we have the torp power, and the guns actually do punch through them there. You've probably noticed at this point that I'm shooting a lot of armor piercing, and that's because we're finding broadsides, at least in these examples, but the HE might be a great option as well. With Thor in particular at tier 10, I do need to test that out more. Here, our HE is okay. 5100 Alpha is fine for 380 millimeter guns. Poor AFK Andalusia there. I guess his game crashed, but 4 Citadels there with the alpha damage buff. I think that would have been a full dev strike, actually. Surprising accuracy every once in a while. It's very random, though, feeling. But with the HE, we don't have very good fire chance. That is the downside here. 24% fire chance is very bad. Even with Thor at 36% fire chance, that's not great either. Although I guess considering the reload that these ships can get down to, as soon as you take reload mod, a little bit of AR, you're at 20-second reload very, very quickly. The HE on a kited flank like this, where we're dealing with pretty tanky ships like Montana and soon to be a Libertad pushing, perhaps that's a good idea as well. 64 mil pen on the HE is decent as well, but I just don't like shooting HE out of my battleships, as you guys know. I will need to test that out for you guys more, though, just in this initial set of videos. Didn't have time necessarily for it. However, this I really was happy to see. My flank completely collapsing, which is not usually what you want, of course, but I wanted to see how this line would perform because I hypothesized with Thor that we would do quite well on a flank like this. They can't really keep us lit unless the DD knows to stay within that 1.5 kilometer window. And even then, we can just speed boost away from them. We have solid enough armor to tank for a little while. However, with Gustav and our unfortunate kiting firing angles, I also wanted to see if we could deal with this sort of flank that I do think Thor will be better on because of its kited angles being reasonable. Do we take a lot of damage when we're broadside on like this to an Iowa, Montana, maybe a Libertad? Our torps, are they good enough to help us deal with these flanks? I'm not the best at torping into battleships that are pushing in like this. I seem to just misaim them all the time, but send them into choke points. 15 kilometers of range is absolutely amazing. And again, they do a lot of damage when they do hit. At will, just going dark. He's 11.8 kilometers away from us. Yeah, we're just dark. Libertad gets spotted, and guess what? We don't want to be in his secondary range. So we use our engine boost to power away from this situation. Our team is going to come back and help us, of course, but I wanted to play with fire here a little bit just to see. We're on 1 million potential damage to start with. Can we survive this situation? Because a battle cruiser caught in the open like this against a Libertad, a Montana, an Iowa, soon to be a sub chasing us as well, certainly could not survive in this situation. And I think that's the real power here, is that we have the survivability of battleships with the utility of cruisers. We really don't have the weaknesses that a lot of those cruisers do have with their armor profile. Even here with Gustav, where our superstructure admittedly is quite a bit bigger than on Thor, I still didn't find myself eating all that much damage. Libertad, we do, I think, have a decent lineup for these torpedoes. Again, them being a little slower than Thor is a downside, certainly. So they're spotted, and he's going to drift through them. Dang it, man. I just want to land some torps while I'm in this kited position. It's still going pretty well, though. Already up to 165k damage in this one, and over 2 million potential damage now. It's surprising how survivable these ships are, guys. It really is. And this one, of course, has that weakness of kiting firing angles. Wargaming, if you're listening, by the way, I think this would be a great way to design ships going forward. If you want people to push in more, you need to incentivize them to have an advantage when pushing in, and perhaps that the people kiting away from those pushing in have a disadvantage. So I think that works actually really well to have the kiting firing angles be worse. It means you're at a disadvantage then, where usually there's just only positives when people are pushing into you. In this case, though, not so. When we're pushing in, we have much better, more comfortable firing angles on Gustav. Something like GK is the opposite. GK wants to be pushing and brawling, and yet it's got the atrocious firing angles. So then you just end up kiting with it, right? Anyways, that aside later, yes, we did actually just completely miss an Iowa at 12 kilometers. It trolls, as well as I think we got hit in the torpedo section there of our ship. I showed that off in the Thor video as well, but there are some shot catchers there. This one, though, does have a bit of deck armor covering it, so it should be a little bit less often you have that shot catching. But over 3 million potential damage against a Libertad pushing into us. We had a good team that came to support us, but for a battleship with 65k HP and the utility of a cruiser, you would think that it's not getting that level of potential damage in some of those matches. I was impressed. I was pleasantly surprised by the survivability. Whether or not that makes it more balanced or not, probably not. It should have a little bit more weaknesses, I think, considering the strengths of the utility here. And we are going to see buffs from this video as well. This is not the release final version of the ship. 2-second faster reload, as well as nearly 1,000 more alpha damage on these main guns. Jaeger tries to push the flank, and we can just radar him to spot him out. It's so valuable to have this extra radar on your team. I've talked about this when it came to Rhode Island. Rhode Island B came back for Black Friday last year, and it's just incredibly valuable for your team to have an extra radar, but not in the cruiser slot, in the battleship slot. It means you can often overload flanks with extra radars on caps, and you can absolutely dominate flanks that way, just on utility alone. That extra spotting on the enemy destroyer. DDs win games, guys. The extra spotting, the cap contesting, even just the area denial that torp boats have on the flanks. It is incredible how those positions just win maps. And having a radar to spot that out is ridiculously powerful. As is Overmatch, apparently. Broadside San Diego? No, we don't do damage there. No, no, no. It's only when he's angled in and I think playing better. Of course, right? Of course. We have to do the damage when he's going to be most frustrated at taking the Overmatch, and not do the damage when I, as the battleship player, am most frustrated seeing the broadside cruiser get away with 0. Very funny. I wish those roles were flipped, by the way. That's kind of my philosophy on Overmatch. Less Overmatch, more consistent damage to broadside is kind of how I view it. We do take a Citadel finally when we're broadside to the Los Andes. This is also something Wargaming. What's so wrong with having ships with vulnerable citadels, like above water citadels maybe? Like, these ships already are tanky enough when they're angled. Maybe it'd be a good idea for them to have that broadside weakness, especially if you gave them poor kiting firing angles, perhaps? It's just a lot that these ships have. And since this is just the first impressions on these ships, I haven't played them enough yet, you know, the hundreds of games that I have in other battleship lines. It's hard for me to tell if they're actually going to be that busted. I know the utility is crazy, but maybe they just die quicker than I expect, because here we're actually about to go down. I'm eating a permanent flood. The fire is about to go out, but I think we're going to eat another fire here rather quickly. And our overmatch, or at least our superstructure, is going to take some damage from this Los Andes. This is what happens when you get caught within the Pan-American battleship line secondaries. This is why I needed to get away from that Libertad. Here, I got caught, and now we are going to go down before we even reach 1 million potential damage. Maybe this is going to be the usual experience in these new battleships, and maybe it's not so bad. But when you do position them well, maybe that's going to be the challenge, is the positioning and trying to keep them alive long enough to use that radar utility. I'm not sure. As you can tell, rather conflicted at the moment. I just think the extra utility that you gain as a battleship, making it more like a cruiser without the downsides of cruisers, is a little wild. And now that we're back in port here, looking at the armor layout, it is a big superstructure. Maybe these are less survivable than I think. Maybe I've been getting lucky with surviving so long in these ships. And of course, we do have to talk about the inconsistency on the battleship dispersion. 1.8 Sigma, it's going to make it frustrating for me to play, but 40 mil deck armor, 70 mil upper belt here. The Citadel is certainly at waterline. Yeah, and it has some spaced armor to go with it. So 300 millimeters plus 32. Not as well armored as the Thor was. That one was even thicker armor, but it's still waterline, so it's harder to hit. And the superstructure is quite large here. At the stern, not so much, but this section here, and it's actually superstructure here, not casemate armor here. So a little bit of weakness there, I guess. It's a small ship. It's got great detection. It is going to be rather difficult to hit considering its maneuverability. 840 meter turning circle radius with a 12.1 second rudder. The AA is kind of garbage though. The Thor AA still wasn't even enough to really survive if a carrier wants you dead, of course. We have 5 flak bursts only versus Thor's 14, I want to say. Yeah. Wild. Absolutely wild difference there. Even in the comparison, you can tell how much bigger this superstructure is. And yet we still were able to tank quite a lot. These 381mm guns certainly are slow. That is a weakness relative to Thor's strength, right? That one has very fast shells. This one does not. We also are going to see a buff to these guns, so they could get even better. You saw a lot of the inconsistency, though, throughout this video. They can, when they hit, they're quite solid still, especially into broadside cruisers. Not a lot of HP here. And maybe you were wondering why I wasn't talking about the secondaries at all in the Thor video, and I'll bring it up here. Well, the secondaries have base battleship accuracy, and with Gustav in particular, out of all the tier 9 battleships in the entire game, this has the worst hitting DPM at 10 kilometers. So really, like, you're better off running Iowa Nobody runs Iowa secondary build. If you do, please change. I'm not going to tell you how to build your ship, but you should not be running these as secondary builds, okay? You need to buff the main guns as much as you can, and then play them like a battle cruiser, taking huge advantage of the radar here. Maybe you think the secondaries, oh, we get the secondaries out to our radar range, they add some supplemental damage. But with their terrible accuracy, you think you're going to hit a destroyer? Remember, with manual secondaries, it takes 45 seconds to even actually buff your accuracy to their maximum using this skill. So your radar doesn't last that long. I don't see it. I don't see it personally. I think you want to build just for main guns, aiming systems mod, take steering gears because we should have our emergency engine power available to us for when we need that burst of acceleration. At least that's what I was finding when playing. But prop mod is also good here too. Concealment, of course, and then reload, of course. This one has 20.8 kilometers of range with an 11.4 detect. Very comfy. I often talk about this when it's cruisers, right? We're talking about cruisers a lot of the time where the distance between your detection and your firing range often dictates how comfortable the ship feels to play, just game to game. The greater that distance, of course, the more comfortable it is. So having that is very nice. And at the end of the day, you still just have battleship armor. And so I think that's going to about do it on Gustav. A very solid tier 9 battleship, crazy utility, surprisingly good survivability. It remains to be seen, of course. Little inconsistent dispersion, I think, for me personally. I know myself and how I tend to get a little frustrated, shall we say, with inconsistent dispersion. That might be a bit of the Achilles heel for this line for me personally. We'll see though. Plenty more to be played. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.